Have you ever gone to a hardware store or home center to buy a solvent or a thinner and been confused by all the cans on the rack? My grandfather had two solvents in his shop. He had paint thinner and turpentine, and we couldn't use either of them after we painted the mailbox because the gasoline out in the shed was cheaper, and who really cares if the grandkids catch on fire? Now I see cans with all sorts of things that I struggle to pronounce, like toluene and methyl ethyl ketone. What the heck is all this stuff, and which ones belong in the average everyday woodworking shop? Well, if you're a woodworker like me, you use solvents to dissolve things that are hard and sticky, like adhesives, to clean things that are oily and greasy, like tools or machinery, and to thin things, like your oil-based finishes. As I said, turpentine used to be the go-to solvent for these purposes, because for centuries, that's pretty much all there was. But around World War II, they figured out when you heat up petroleum, all its various components evaporate out at different temperatures, and then they could recondense them into liquid forms, extracting many products from the one, most of them being useful solvents. Most of these solvents do pretty much the same thing. They dissolve stuff and they thin stuff, but it's their various strengths, consistencies, and evaporation speeds that make one different from the other. In the woodworking world, this means one solvent may be better for cleaning up greasy tools, while another may be better for cleaning up adhesives. Likewise, a fast evaporating solvent may be better for thinning one finish, while a slower evaporating solvent may be better for another. We can match different levels of strength and different speeds of evaporation to the specific jobs at hand if we choose the right solvent. Naphtha, for example, evaporates more quickly than, say, mineral spirits, and it's less oily, so it leaves very little film behind. This makes it better for cleaning the packing oil from a new tool, or for removing the resinous buildup from the rollers of an electric planer, or even for wiping down oily woods before finishing. Mineral spirits will do some of these same things, but it may leave behind an undesirable oily film. However, because mineral spirits evaporate more slowly than naphtha, it's better for thinning oil-based finishes because the finish will have more time to level on the wood surface before it dries. By the way, if you see a can labeled paint thinner, it's just mineral spirits marketed for that specific purpose. There's no difference in the contents. Odorless mineral spirits are made by removing the components toluene and xylene. This leaves a better smelling mineral spirit that's still perfectly effective for thinning finishes, but slightly weakened as a solvent. On their own, toluene and xylene that was removed from the mineral spirits are powerful degreasers that evaporate quickly, making them useful for cleaning in industrial settings. Toluene is little hard to find in the average hardware store, but xylene finds its way back into our workshops in cans like these and under the brand name Goof Off and Oops. One of its principal uses for woodworkers is to soften dried latex paint, or as a last resort for removing some wood glue residue you missed before finishing. Xylene is also useful for cleaning raw metal before applying a finish, but naphtha will work just about as well for less money, and the fumes are less harmful, although I'd still take precautions. As a thinner for oil-based finishes, xylene will dry faster than mineral spirits, and toluene, if you can find it, will dry faster than xylene. So these three solvents give you 3 levels of customization for your finishing projects. Now, while we're talking about thinners, what about lacquer thinner? First, you have to know what lacquer is. Lacquer isn't just one type of finish. It's a family of varnishes made from different resins or polymers that are quick drying, and it includes many types of spray finishes. So it's no surprise that lacquer thinner is a mix of solvents designed to dissolve and thin these various types of lacquers. Different manufacturers mix these solvents in different ways to achieve different levels of strength and rates of evaporation. So they are not all created equal, though the base ingredients are pretty much the same. You have some ketones, some esters, some alcohols, some glycol ethers, and I think I smell a little dash of rosemary. A discussion of lacquer thinner is better left for a tutorial about spray finishing because it's a big subject. But if you see a can of lacquer thinner on the shelf at a hardware store, it's probably the cheap stuff that's mostly xylene or naphtha, and it's intended to clean spray equipment, not to properly thin your fine spray finishes. Now remember how I said ketones were used in lacquer thinners? There are 2 solvents in the ketone family that are also sold on their own off the shelf at stores. This is acetone and MEK, or methyl ethyl ketone. They're both similar as far as woodworking uses. They're among the fastest drying solvents available, making them great for wiping down something without leaving a film. And they're also pretty powerful solvents. They can be used to clean up superglue and epoxy before it hardens, for example. They'll quickly dissolve grease and adhesives, including contact cement and the polish from your nails. MEK is a harsher chemical than acetone, but even acetone is pretty harsh. Some companies have developed alternatives for those that must use it to thin special coatings like fiberglass resin, but the only real use I've found for acetone in my shop is to remove things like Sharpie marks, and I don't use MEK much at all. Finally, we have good old denatured alcohol. At its base, this is the same type of ethyl alcohol that can get you hammered, but they mix in lots of poison to avoid the tax man, so don't drink it. This will remove Sharpie ink too, but its most common use in woodworking is to dissolve shellac flakes into thin liquid shellac. I also like to wipe some of it on a fancy piece of wood to see what it'll look like when it's finished, because this won't leave any sort of film like mineral spirits might, so I don't have to worry about it interfering with a water-based finish that I might put on later. So let's review. I use naphtha or mineral spirits to clean grease, wax or resin for my tools, such as the top of my table saw or the rollers on my electric planer. I use xylene for tougher jobs, such as cleaning the packing grease for my new hand plane, removing adhesives, cleaning up epoxy before it dries, and sometimes to remove that thin film of glue that might have been left on after sanding. For wiping down a wood surface to remove dust, I use mineral spirits if I am going to apply an oil-based finish or a paste wax. I use denatured alcohol if I plan on applying a water-based finish or shellac. For thinning finishes or cleaning up afterwards, you can usually use mineral spirits for oil-based finishes, alcohol for shellac, and good quality lacquer thinner for spray lacquers. If you wish to experiment with drying times, you can substitute one of the other solvents for mineral spirits, but that's the subject of another tutorial. I wouldn't worry about keeping acetone or MEK or toluene on hand unless a specific task calls for it. And always well ventilate the area when using any solvent and wear a proper respirator. For some more useful finishing tutorials, such as the differences between oil finishes or lacquers, check out the links below this video in the description. We'll see you next time. This is a Koenigsegg, Sweden's finest sports car. This is a Sjöbergs, Sweden's finest workbench. There are things for people who appreciate quality and high performance, something they can pass down to their grandkids. You can't afford this, but this will cost you less than a good cabinet saw. Check out what Sjöbergs has to offer at the link below this video. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.